The sterile chamber pulsed with a faint blue glow, casting elongated shadows across the organic contours of what Captain Jian Li had come to call his cell. Unlike the utilitarian confinement facilities of Earth Defense Force vessels, this place seemed alive. Walls that breathed almost imperceptibly, surfaces that responded to temperature and touch with subtle color changes, and an omnipresent hum that resonated just below the threshold of conscious hearing. Jian had been counting cycles, not days, as the concept had little meaning in the depths of the Xylos Collective's territory. 27 cycles since his stealth reconnaissance craft had been detected and disabled by defenses far more advanced than EDF intelligence had anticipated. 27 cycles of existence in this antiseptic nightmare, where even the recycled air tasted of something alien and medicinal. The cell was spacious enough to prevent claustrophobia, but devoid of any features that might serve as weapons or tools. No edges, no seams, just flowing organic architecture that EDF xenobiologists would have killed to study. The bathroom facilities were integrated seamlessly into the walls, appearing and disappearing as needed, operated by some form of ambient intelligence that anticipated his biological needs with unsettling accuracy. Jian maintained his routine religiously. Physical exercises modified for the limited space, mental discipline drills, and memory exercises designed to keep his mind sharp against the disorienting effects of isolation. His military-grade neural implants had been deactivated somehow, cutting him off from the tactical network that had been a constant presence in his mind for over 15 years of service. The membrane-like door rippled, and Jian immediately assumed a neutral standing position, back straight, hands visible at his sides, a posture that communicated neither aggression nor submission. The seared training, survival, evasion, resistance, escape, had been drilled into him so deeply that it had become instinct rather than conscious thought. Bishop Scar entered, flanked by 2 drone guards, biomechanical constructs that combined insectoid precision with vat-grown muscle tissue. Scar himself stood nearly 2 meters tall, his exoskeleton a deep iridescent blue-black that signified his high rank within the Xylos hierarchy. Unlike the drones, whose compound eyes glowed with artificial light, Scar's eyes were disturbingly sophisticated, multifaceted, but capable of focusing like a predator's, with an intelligence that transcended species barriers. Captain Jian Li, Scar's voice emerged not from his mandibles, which remained perfectly still, but from what appeared to be a modified vocal sac beneath his thorax. The words were flawlessly human in pronunciation, but utterly devoid of inflection or emotion. You have now been examined for 27 cycles. Your biological resilience is notable. Jian remained silent, his face an impassive mask. Name, rank, and identification number were the only information he was required to provide, and he had already done so upon capture. Your silence is counterproductive, Scar continued, his multiple limbs moving in precise, economical gestures as he directed one of the drones to deploy a floating diagnostic array. We have methods of extraction that do not require your cooperation. Captain Jian Li, Earth Defense Force, ID 73829 Alpha Victor, Jian recited mechanically. Yes, so you have stated. Scar moved closer, his head tilting in a manner that Jian had come to recognize as analytical interest. Your species has a curious relationship with information. You guard it jealously, yet your bodies leak data continuously. The diagnostic array hummed to life, bathing Jian in a purple light that made his skin tingle uncomfortably. He knew from previous cycles that this was some form of quantum scanning technology capable of mapping his cellular structure down to the molecular level. The Xylos were masters of biotechnology, having evolved from a hive-intelligent species that had somehow maintained their collective consciousness even as they developed individual sapience. Your cortisol levels have decreased since our last interaction, Scar observed. Your adrenal response is adapting to our presence. This suggests either psychological resilience or... He paused, mandibles clicking softly, resignation. Captain Jian Li, Earth Defense Force, ID 73829 Alpha Victor, Jian repeated. Scar made a sound that might have been the Xylo's equivalent of a sigh. We will proceed to environmental calibration phase 7. Without further warning, the temperature in the cell plummeted. Within seconds, Jian's breath clouded before his face, and his standard-issue prisoner garment, a seamless gray bodysuit of some biotextile material, offered little protection against the sudden cold. This was a new tactic, one that Jian had been trained to expect but had not yet experienced. In his captivity, your core temperature is dropping, Scar stated the obvious, watching the data stream from the diagnostic array. This will trigger certain autonomic responses that will be informative. Jian forced himself to breathe steadily, using meditative techniques to regulate his body's response to the cold. He knew the Xylos were studying not just what he might say under duress, but how his biology and psychology functioned under stress. Every reaction, every physiological response, was data they could weaponize against humanity. Interesting, Scar's voice betrayed the faintest hint of something akin to surprise. Your hypothalamic regulation exceeds baseline human parameters. The temperature normalized as suddenly as it had dropped, followed immediately by an increase in gravitational pressure. Jian felt his knees buckle slightly as his effective weight nearly doubled. The Xylos facility clearly had gravity manipulation technology far beyond Earth's capabilities. Gravity response nominal, Scar noted, almost to himself. Skeletal density suggests long-term low-G adaptation. Yet muscular response indicates enhanced gravity conditioning. Jian remained standing through sheer force of will, knowing that each small victory, each expected response denied, represented tactical information withheld. The pressure returned to normal, but now the lighting shifted to a harsh ultraviolet spectrum that made Jian's eyes water involuntarily. The diagnostic array adjusted, focusing narrowly on his pupillary responses and the subtle changes in his skin pigmentation. Captain, Scar moved even closer, his alien face now less than a meter from Jian's. Your resistance is not merely trained. It is engineered. For the first time, Jian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the environmental manipulation. Scar had noticed something beyond the expected resilience of a trained special operations officer. Your cellular response to environmental stressors shows patterns consistent with advanced biomodification, Scar continued, his compound eyes reflecting Jian's face in hundreds of tiny facets. Not crude genetic alteration, but something more elegant, more deliberate. One of the drone guards approached with another device, this one resembling a translucent orb filled with swirling silver particles. Scar took it and held it near Jian's face. This is a nanite probe scanner, he explained, almost professorial in his tone. It detects microscopic machines or engineered biological elements that might be hiding within a host organism. Jian maintained his composure, but internally his mind raced. The chronospore was supposed to be undetectable, a last resort weapon disguised as natural cellular components, dormant until activated by either his death or conscious triggering. No scanning technology should have been able to distinguish it from his normal biology. The orb pulsed once, and Scar's entire posture changed, his limbs stiffening momentarily before relaxing into a new configuration that Jian hadn't seen before. If he had to anthropomorphize the reaction, he would have called it alarmed interest. Captain Lee, Scar's voice had changed, taking on a new harmonic quality that somehow conveyed urgency without emotion. You will be transferred to a specialized containment and analysis chamber. Resistance is inadvisable. The two drone guards moved in perfect synchrony, positioning themselves on either side of Jian. He considered his options and found them severely limited. The SEER protocols emphasized survival and information control above escape, when the latter was impossible. For now, compliance was the tactical choice. I will cooperate with transfer, he stated clearly, keeping his hands visible as the drone guards engaged proximity restraints. Not physical bonds, but fields of energy that created painful feedback if he moved too quickly or beyond a certain radius of the guards. As they escorted him from the cell that had been his world for 27 cycles, Jin caught a glimpse of Scar communicating with some unseen entity, his mandibles and limbs moving in patterns that suggested an urgent transmission to the Xylos Collective. For the first time since his capture, Jin felt something other than determined resistance. He felt fear. The specialized containment chamber made his previous cell look primitive by comparison. Where the cell had been merely sterile and alien, this new environment was a masterpiece of biotechnology integrated with quantum-level scanning equipment. The walls themselves seemed to be composed of living tissue interwoven with crystalline structures that pulsed with data patterns too complex for human eyes to interpret. Jin was secured to an examination platform that conformed to his body with disturbing precision, as though it had been molded specifically for his physiology. Instead of restraints, the platform simply adhered to him, creating a sensation of immobility without actual physical constraints. Scar entered alone this time, his movements more deliberate than before. Behind him floated multiple diagnostic arrays, more sophisticated than anything Jian had seen thus far. The bishop approached the platform and initiated a scanning sequence without preamble. "Your biology harbors a secret, Captain," Scar stated, his voice now containing harmonic undertones that seemed designed to penetrate Jian's consciousness at a deeper level. "A secret that my initial scans suggest poses an extinction-level threat to the Xylos Collective." Jian remained silent, focusing on controlling his breathing and heart rate. The platform beneath him seemed to be sampling his perspiration, analyzing his micro-expressions, and monitoring every infinitesimal biological response. "I will be direct, as deception serves neither of us now," Scar continued, manipulating holographic displays that showed microscopic images of what Jian recognized as his own cellular structure. "You carry within you an engineered pathogen of extraordinary sophistication, what your military designation would call a self-replicating nanobiological weapon system. We have detected its presence, though its complete nature eludes our analysis." Jian maintained his silence, though he knew the game had fundamentally changed. The chronospore had been Earth's ultimate fallback plan, a weapon so morally questionable that only a handful of special operators had been selected as carriers, and only after psychological profiles confirmed they could bear the responsibility without breaking. "Your silence confirms my assessment." Scar's multifaceted eyes seemed to examine Jian with new intensity. "This weapon, shall we call it by its designation? Our intelligence suggests chronospore is the term. It is designed to activate upon your death, is it not? A dead man's trigger of biological annihilation." The directness of the statement caught Jian off guard, though he managed to suppress any visible reaction. The fact that Scar knew the weapon's designation suggested a security breach of catastrophic proportions, or, more likely, that the Xylos' biological analysis capabilities far exceeded Earth's intelligence estimates. "Fascinating design," Scar continued, seemingly unbothered by Jian's continued silence. "Not merely destructive, but selectively destructive, engineered to target the specific neurological and genetic markers that define Xylos biology while leaving other life forms unaffected. A precision apocalypse contained within a single human vessel." The diagnostic arrays pulsed in sequence, bathing Jian in energies that made his teeth ache and his vision blur momentarily. "The integration with your cellular structure is elegant," Scar sounded almost admiring. "Not simply hosted within your body, but encoded into your very DNA, using your own cells as both camouflage and initial replication medium. Upon activation, I hypothesize it would transform your entire biomass into a primary dispersal mechanism before seeking new hosts with Xylos genetic markers." Jian knew the assessment was accurate. The chronospore was designed to use the carrier's body as its first manufacturing plant, converting it entirely into billions of nanobiological particles that would seek out and infiltrate Xylos biology, causing a cascading cellular breakdown that would collapse their hive mind neural networks while triggering accelerated telomere degradation. A slow, Inevitable extinction rather than an immediate massacre, but extinction nonetheless. What puzzles me, Captain, Scar tilted his head in that now familiar gesture of analytical curiosity, is why such a weapon has not already been deployed against our kind on a larger scale. Its existence suggests your species possesses the technological capability to eradicate us, yet you have limited its use to, what, a handful of special operatives like yourself? A last resort deadlock? This seems inefficient by your species' usual military doctrine. The question hit uncomfortably close to the ethical debates that had raged within EDF High Command. The chronospore represented a moral line that many were unwilling to cross. Biological warfare capable of exterminating an entire sentient species, regardless of combatant status. In the end, it had been authorized only as a deterrent and intelligence-gathering failsafe, carried by operators on the most sensitive missions with the strictest deployment protocols. I will now conduct a more invasive analysis, Scar announced, manipulating controls that caused new equipment to emerge from recesses in the chamber walls. This process will allow me to map the complete structure and activation mechanisms of the chronospore. A slender apparatus extended toward Jian's head, terminating in what appeared to be a crystalline needle of impossible thinness. This neural probe will extract a complete scan of your brain's activity patterns, including access to memory centers related to your weapon system, Scar explained clinically. I must warn you that the procedure has not been calibrated for human neurology. Survival probability is estimated at 17.3%, with significant neural damage likely even in survival scenarios. For the first time, Jian broke his silence with something other than his identification mantra. The procedure will trigger the chronospore. Scar paused, the neural probe hovering centimeters from Jian's temple. Explain. The weapon activates on detection of brain death or catastrophic neural pattern disruption, Jian stated flatly. Your probe will register as the latter. The chamber fell, silent save for the ambient hum of the diagnostic equipment. Scar remained motionless, his alien physiology giving no clear indication of his thought process. You have broken silence to convey this information, Scar finally observed. This suggests you do not wish the weapon to activate. I'm following protocol, Jian replied. Carriers are required to provide clear warning of imminent unintentional activation risks. Curious, Scar retracted the neural probe slightly. Your protocols include warning your enemy of actions that might trigger your ultimate weapon? This seems counterintuitive. The chronospore is not designed for tactical deployment, Jian explained, carefully measuring each word. It is a strategic deterrent with strict activation protocols. Yet you carry it into our territory, Scar countered. This suggests deployment intent. I carry it as insurance against certain capture scenarios, Jian corrected. Its presence aboard my craft was known and accepted as an operational risk by EDF Command. Scar's mandibles clicked in a pattern that Jian had learned indicated intense analytical processing. You possess a weapon capable of eradicating my entire species, activation authority for which rests solely with you, and yet you warn me of actions that might trigger it accidentally. Your behavior pattern is inconsistent with standard military logic. Human military logic includes ethical considerations regarding weapons of mass destruction, Jian stated, knowing he was providing valuable intelligence, but seeing no alternative path. Unintentional activation would violate those ethics. Ethics, Scar repeated the word as though testing its taste. Constraints on effective action based on abstract values rather than strategic outcome optimization. A curious evolutionary development. The bishop manipulated another set of controls, and the neural probe retracted fully into the wall. In its place, a different apparatus emerged, this one emitting a soft golden light. This is a quantum state interrogator, Scar explained. Less invasive than neural probing, though significantly less comprehensive. It will not trigger your weapon's activation protocols, but will allow surface-level analysis of your conscious thoughts related to specific query parameters. Jian tensed. Any form of mind-reading technology, however limited, represented a critical security threat. His seer training included techniques for mental compartmentalization and thought discipline, but those were designed to resist human interrogation methods, not alien technology that could directly scan neural activity. Your physiological response indicates concern, Scar noted. Reassurance. This technology cannot access memories or subconscious knowledge. It merely detects truthfulness and emotional association with specific concepts when they are consciously considered. The golden light expanded to envelop Jian's head in a warm glow. Unlike the previous scans, this created no discomfort. If anything, it induced a slight sense of calm that Jian immediately recognized as potentially dangerous. Artificial serenity could undermine his psychological defenses. Query 1, Scar began. Is the activation of the chronospore within your conscious control, or is it exclusively a dead man's trigger? Jian considered his options carefully. The question targeted information that was already compromised. Scar clearly knew of the weapon's existence and its primary activation mechanism. Confirmation of secondary trigger methods might provide tactical advantage in future scenarios. It has multiple activation protocols, he answered truthfully, but incompletely. The golden field pulsed once. Partial truth detected, Scar observed. Query refined. Can you consciously trigger the chronospore while still alive? Yes. The field remained steady. Truth confirmed. Scar's voice took on a new harmonic pattern that Jian couldn't interpret. Query 2. What is the activation method for conscious deployment? This question crossed the line into critical classified information. Jian focused his mind on his resistance training, specifically the mental partitioning techniques. I cannot answer that question. The golden field fluctuated. Erratically. Resistance detected, Scar noted. Interesting. Your neural patterns suggest trained countermeasures against interrogation. This confirms the strategic importance of the activation method. Scar adjusted something in the field, causing it to shift from gold to a deeper amber hue. Query modified. Does the conscious activation require external equipment or technology? Jian maintained his focus on mental resistance, but the amber field seemed to bypass his trained defenses with disturbing ease. He felt an answer forming in his mind unbidden. No external technology required. The field stabilized. Truth confirmed. Query 3. Does conscious activation require specific bodily action, such as a gesture or physical trigger? Again, Jian tried to resist, but found the question answering itself almost autonomously. No physical trigger required. Truth confirmed. Scar's analytical interest was palpable now. Query 4. Is the conscious activation mechanism purely mental, a specific thought pattern or neural sequence? Jian summoned his last reserves of mental discipline, focusing on the core seer mantra: name, rank, identification number. He visualized them as a shield against the probing field. Captain Jian Li, Earth Defense Force, ID 73829 Alpha Victor, he recited aloud, forcing his mind to loop the information repeatedly. The amber field flared brightly, then reverted to its previous state. Resistance partially successful, Scar acknowledged. However, neural pattern fluctuation suggests affirmative response to query. Conclusion: activation mechanism involves specific thought pattern or neural sequence. The interrogation field retracted, and Scar moved to a different control panel. Your resistance is impressive, but ultimately informative in itself. The chronospore can be activated by a specific thought pattern that you have been trained to generate. Jian remained silent, conserving his mental energy. The interrogation had confirmed what the Xylos had likely already deduced, while still protecting the precise neural sequence that would trigger activation. A complex pattern involving layered memory recall, mathematical calculation, and specific emotional states that had been conditioned through months of specialized training. We now face a strategic impasse, Captain Li, Scar stated, turning his full attention back to Jian. My analysis of the chronospore, though incomplete, suggests it represents an extinction-level threat to the Xylos collective. Standard protocol would dictate immediate neutralization of the threat carrier, You, through rapid cellular dissolution. Jin met the alien's compound gaze steadily, which would trigger immediate activation. Precisely, Scar confirmed. A classic deadlock scenario. We cannot kill you without triggering the weapon, yet keeping you alive perpetuates the threat of conscious activation. There is a third option, Jin suggested, knowing he was entering dangerous negotiation territory, but seeing strategic value in prolonging his survival. Continued containment with basic life support. You've already demonstrated capability to neutralize any escape attempt. Containment without information extraction represents insufficient value return, Scar countered. Your tactical value lies primarily in the intelligence you possess, not merely in the prevention of weapon deployment. Then we're at an impasse, Jin concluded. Scar's mandibles clicked in that now familiar pattern of intense processing. Perhaps not. Alternative approach. You possess information of tactical value to the collective. You also possess the means to cause our extinction. Logical proposal. Information exchange for continued biological maintenance. You're suggesting a trade, Jin translated. Intelligence in exchange for not killing me. Crude but accurate summation, Scar confirmed. You provide verified intelligence of tactical value. In exchange, we ensure your continued survival under containment conditions. It was Jian's turn to carefully consider the proposal. EDF protocols were clear regarding intelligence compromise, resistance until death. But those protocols assumed conventional capture scenarios, not one where the capture officer carried a doomsday weapon that activated upon death. What guarantee would I have that you would maintain the agreement after intelligence transfer? Jian asked. The same guarantee we would have that you would not activate the chronospore after your demands are met, Scar replied. Mutual assured destruction is its own enforcement mechanism. The logic was sound if cold. Jian weighed his options carefully. The intelligence he possessed was significant, but primarily tactical rather than strategic. Fleet movements, patrol patterns, sensor capabilities. Information that would provide the Xylos advantages in specific engagements, but not alter the overall balance of the conflict. More importantly, much of that intelligence would become obsolete within weeks as EDF protocols dictated regular rotation of tactical parameters after a confirmed capture. His death, by contrast, would trigger an apocalyptic scenario from which there would be no return, the extinction of an entire sentient species. Limited tactical intelligence only, Jin specified. Nothing strategic or long-term. Nothing about Earth's core defense systems or civilian population centers. Acceptable parameters, Scar agreed. Specific intelligence targets will include current EDF patrol routes in the Proxima sector, stealth technology specifications for your reconnaissance craft, and countermeasures employed against Xylos detection systems. The request was precisely calibrated, valuable enough to justify Jian's continued existence from the Xylos perspective, but limited enough in scope that the information would be largely obsolete within a standard EDF security rotation cycle. Before I agree, Jian said, I need to understand what continued biological maintenance entails. Standard containment protocols, Scar specified. Adequate nutrition, exercise capability, psychological stimulation sufficient to prevent cognitive deterioration. No neural probing or invasive analysis. Regular medical assessment to ensure chronospore stability. And if I refuse? Jin asked, though he already knew the answer. Then we reach decision point, Scar stated simply. Final deep scan analysis with high probability of neural disruption, accepting activation risk, or permanent stasis containment with minimal life support and no consciousness. Neither option was acceptable. The first would trigger the weapon. The second would effectively end Jin's existence as a conscious being while still keeping the chronospore in play as a threat. I have a counter-proposal, Jin said, an idea forming. I will provide the tactical intelligence you've requested, verifiable through your quantum state interrogator. In exchange, you will maintain suitable containment conditions as described. Those were the original terms, Scar noted. With one addition, Jin continued. You will acknowledge to your collective leadership that I possessed the capability to trigger the chronospore at any time during my captivity, including now, but have chosen not to do so despite having the means and opportunity. Scar's compound eyes seemed to focus more intensely. Clarify purpose of this addition. Insurance, Jin explained. I want your leadership to understand that humans are capable of restraint even when possessing overwhelming destructive capability. That we can choose not to destroy when we have the power to do so. Scar remained motionless for several moments, his alien physiology giving no clear indication of his reaction to this unusual request. Finally, his mandibles clicked once. Your addition serves no apparent tactical advantage, he observed. Yet you prioritize it alongside your own survival. Explain. Because it's true, Jin said simply. And because it matters. I could end the Xylos Collective right now with a thought pattern that would take less than 3 seconds to generate. I'm choosing not to. That choice deserves recognition. The containment chamber fell silent as Scar processed this information. The concept seemed to challenge something fundamental in the Xylos worldview, something about power, its purpose, and its application. Your request will be granted, Scar finally stated. Information exchange will begin in the next cycle, using non-invasive verification methods. Continued biological maintenance will be provided according to specified parameters. Collective leadership will be informed of your weapon capability and voluntary non-activation. As the bishop turned to leave, he paused at the chamber entrance, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the ambient light in patterns that seemed almost contemplative. One final query. Captain Lee, he said, not for tactical value, but for understanding. Why choose restraint when destruction would ensure your species' strategic advantage? Jin considered the question carefully. The answer touched on something fundamental about humanity that the Xylos might never fully comprehend. Because extinction is irreversible, he said finally. And because having the power to destroy doesn't make destruction inevitable or necessary. Scar's mandibles clicked softly, a sound Jin had not heard before, neither the rapid clicking of analysis nor the sharp clicks of alarm. This was something else entirely. This will require consideration, the bishop said before exiting the chamber. As the entrance membrane sealed behind Scar, Jin allowed himself the smallest measure of hope. Not for rescue or escape. Those remained virtually impossible. But for something perhaps more significant. Understanding across the vast gulf of evolutionary divergence that separated human from Xylos. An understanding that might eventually lead to something other than mutual annihilation. The information exchange proceeded methodically over the following cycles. Jin provided detailed specifications on EDF patrol patterns in the contested Proxima sector, technical parameters of his stealth reconnaissance craft, and countermeasures employed against Xylos detection systems. Each piece of information was verified through the quantum state interrogator, which confirmed that Jin was providing accurate intelligence within the agreed parameters. Scar supervised the process personally, his analytical interest evident in the meticulous follow-up questions he posed, seeking clarification on technical details and operational protocols. The bishop seemed particularly fascinated by the human approach to stealth technology, which prioritized adaptive countermeasures over perfect invisibility, a philosophy at odds with the Xylos' preference for absolute solutions. Your species accepts partial effectiveness with adaptability rather than pursuing complete effectiveness with specificity, Scar observed during one session. This is consistent with your biological evolution as well, generalists rather than specialists. Jin had noticed a subtle shift in the bishop's interrogation approach. While the questions remained focused on tactical intelligence, Scar increasingly framed them within larger contexts of strategy and philosophy. It was as though the Xylos was using the exchange as an opportunity not just to gather intelligence, but to understand the mind behind it. Final verification complete, Scar announced at the conclusion of the 5th exchange session. Intelligence package meets agreed parameters. Containment protocols will continue as specified. Jin nodded acknowledgement. His physical condition had been maintained as promised. Adequate nutrition, regular exercise periods, and even limited access to non-strategic information feeds that prevented the cognitive deterioration that isolation would otherwise cause. "Has my additional request been fulfilled?" he asked. "Affirmative," Scar confirmed. "The collective leadership has been informed of your weapon capability and voluntary non-activation." Their response was unexpected. Jin raised an eyebrow. "In what way?" Scar seemed to consider his response carefully. "The concept of possessing extinction-level capability without deployment contradicts fundamental Xylo's strategic doctrine. The leadership collective required multiple verification cycles to process the information." "And their conclusion?" "Still processing," Scar admitted. "Your behavior pattern represents a significant anomaly in our understanding of sentient conflict resolution. It has introduced variables that our strategic models cannot easily assimilate." There is something in the bishop's tone, a harmonic quality that Jin had not heard before. If he had to anthropomorphize it, he might have called it unsettled curiosity. "The chronospore remains our most significant concern," Scar continued. "Its continued presence within your biology represents an existential threat to the collective. Yet your demonstrated restraint introduces complications." "What kind of complications?" Jin asked. "Ethical ones," Scar replied, using the word that had seemed so foreign to him cycles earlier. "If you are capable of restraint despite possessing overwhelming destructive capability, then the foundational assumption of our conflict, that humanity represents an existential threat requiring preemptive neutralization, requires reassessment." The implications of this statement were profound. The war between humanity and the Xylos collective had been predicated on mutual perception of existential threat, each species viewing the other as an implacable enemy that must be eliminated to ensure survival. This reassessment, Jin ventured carefully, could it lead to alternatives, to conflict? Unknown. Scar's mandibles clicked in that analytical pattern. Insufficient data points exist. Your individual behavior cannot be extrapolated to your entire species without verification. "But it's a start," Jin suggested. "A statistical anomaly," Scar corrected, "but one that warranted documentation and analysis." Despite the bishop's clinical language, Jin sensed something had fundamentally shifted in the Xylo's perception, not just of him as an individual prisoner, but of humanity as a species. The simple act of choosing not to destroy when destruction was possible had introduced a concept so alien to Xylo's thinking that it required reassessment of their most basic strategic assumptions. "I have been instructed to inform you of a development," Scar said after a moment of silence. "Your continued containment status has been elevated to a matter of collective security. You are now designated as the spore bearer in official documentation." "That sounds ominous," Jin commented. "It is unprecedented," Scar clarified. "No individual of any species has been classified as simultaneously a critical intelligence asset and an extinction-level threat. The containment protocols for your maintenance now fall under direct oversight of the archbishops." The promotion of his case to the highest levels of Xylo's leadership was both concerning and potentially significant. It suggested that his situation had implications beyond tactical intelligence gathering. "What does that mean for our agreement?" Jin asked. "The terms remain unchanged," Scar assured him. "However, your continued non-activation of the chronospore has become a subject of intense study among our strategic philosophers." "Strategic philosophers?" "Those who analyze conflict patterns to determine optimal approaches," Scar explained. "Your restraint pattern does not conform to any known strategic model in our archives. It has necessitated the development of new theoretical frameworks. The idea that his simple choice not to destroy was causing a philosophical crisis within Xylo's strategic thinking was almost amusing, despite the gravity of his situation. Perhaps your philosophers should consider that destruction isn't always the optimal strategic choice," Jin suggested. "Sometimes preservation creates more options than elimination." Scar's compound eyes seemed to study Jin with renewed intensity. "This perspective requires further analysis. It contradicts our evolutionary history. in which elimination of competing genetic lineages was always the optimal survival strategy. Human history followed a similar path, Jian acknowledged, until we recognized that cooperation could create greater collective benefit than competition. It's why we formed communities, nations, and eventually the Earth Defense Force, cooperative entities that achieved more than individuals or smaller groups could alone. Cooperation within a species is logical, Scar countered. Cooperation between species with fundamentally different biological imperatives is problematic. Only if you define success solely in terms of genetic predominance, Jian argued. If you define it in terms of knowledge, technological advancement, or resource utilization efficiency, cross-species cooperation can be optimal for both parties. The conversation had veered far from the original intelligence exchange, in a territory that felt almost like philosophical debate. Jian wasn't sure if Scar was genuinely engaged or simply gathering more data on human thought patterns, but either way, it represented the most substantive communication they had shared. Your perspective will be documented for analysis, Scar finally stated, returning to his more clinical tone. For now, containment protocols will continue as established. Your next assessment is scheduled for 3 cycles hence. As the bishop prepared to leave, Jian called after him. One question, if permitted. Scar paused at the membrane door. Query: what do you personally think of my choice not to activate the chronospore? Not the collective's assessment, but yours. The alien remained motionless for several moments, his exoskeleton reflecting the ambient light in patterns that seemed to shift with his internal processing. I find it terrifying, Scar finally admitted, using a word that Jian had never expected to hear from the clinically detached bishop. Not the weapon itself, though its capacity for species-specific extinction is unprecedented in our archives. What I find truly alarming is the implication that your kind can possess such power and choose restraint. It suggests a level of psychological complexity that defies our understanding of predator-prey relationships and resource competition. Jian considered this carefully. And that frightens you? Deeply, Scar confirmed, his vocal harmonics taking on a quality Jian had never heard before. If you can choose not to destroy us when destruction would be advantageous, what else might you choose? What other behaviors exist outside our predictive models? Your restraint is more terrifying than your weapon because it cannot be quantified or predicted. With that unsettling admission, the bishop departed, leaving Jian to contemplate the profound impact his simple choice not to kill had made on a being whose entire evolutionary and cultural history had been built around the inexorable logic of survival through dominance. Cycles stretched into what Jian estimated to be months by Earth reckoning. His containment conditions remained as agreed, adequate but austere, with regular medical monitoring and limited information access. Scar's visits continued on a predictable schedule, though their nature had evolved from intelligence extraction to something more akin to cultural exchange. The bishop seemed to have been tasked with understanding not just Jian's tactical knowledge, but the psychological and philosophical frameworks that informed human decision-making. There, discussions ranged from military doctrine to ethical systems, from evolutionary psychology to the historical development of human cooperation. Your species developed nuclear weapons capable of planetary sterilization, Scar noted during one such session. Yet despite multiple conflicts, never deployed them at full capacity after the initial demonstration. This pattern is consistent with your individual behavior regarding the chronospore. Mutually assured destruction, Jian explained. When both sides possess the capability to annihilate each other, restraint becomes the rational choice. But your restraint predates enemy capability matching, Scar countered. Historical records indicate decades between your acquisition of nuclear supremacy and the development of similar capabilities by opposing powers. Yet full deployment did not occur during this period of advantage. Jian had to concede the point. There were other factors, moral considerations, concerns about long-term environmental impacts, the recognition that some victories aren't worth their cost. Cost-benefit analysis that includes non-quantifiable variables, Scar translated into his own conceptual framework. This introduces significant uncertainty into strategic calculations. Their conversations often circle back to the same fundamental question, approached from different angles. Why would a species with the capability to destroy choose preservation instead? The questions seem to haunt Scar, and by extension, the Xylos leadership that receive his reports. During the 73rd cycle of his captivity, something changed. Scar arrived outside the standard schedule, accompanied by two figures Jien had never seen before. Their exoskeletons bore markings of iridescent gold and deep crimson, colors that Jien had learned signified the highest echelons of Xylos authority. Captain Lee, Scar's voice carried a new formality. These are Archbishops Nax and Vril of the Collective Strategic Directorate. They have requested direct observation. The Archbishops approached Jien's containment field with evident caution, their compound eyes studying him with an intensity that made even Scar's analytical gaze seem casual by comparison. They carried no visible technology, yet Jien sensed they were scanning him through means beyond his perception. Spore Bearer, the one identified as Nax, addressed him directly. Voice modulation more sophisticated than Scar's, creating harmonics that seemed designed to penetrate deeper levels of consciousness. Your existence represents a strategic paradox that requires resolution. What kind of resolution? Jin asked, tensing slightly. Clarification. Archbishop Vril specified, her voice containing higher harmonic registers that Jin associated with female Xylos. Your continued voluntary non-activation of the extinction mechanism contradicts all predictive models of intelligent species behavior under conditions of existential conflict. As I've explained to Bishop Scar, Jin replied carefully, having the power to destroy doesn't make destruction necessary or inevitable. Yet destruction would ensure your species' strategic advantage, Nax countered. Collective intelligence indicates your Earth Defense Force continues offensive operations against Xylos outposts. Your restraint does not align with your species' broader strategic objectives. Jin chose his words with extreme care, aware that this conversation likely had implications far beyond his personal circumstance. Individual decisions don't always reflect species-wide strategy. Just as your decision to keep me alive rather than risk triggering the chronospore doesn't necessarily reflect Xylos' doctrine on handling existential threats. The archbishops exchanged a series of rapid mandible clicks that Jin couldn't interpret, some form of direct communication not meant for his understanding. The parallel is noted, Vril finally acknowledged. Bishop Scar's decision to prioritize collective survival over intelligence extraction represented similar deviation from established protocol. This was new information. Jin glanced at Scar, who remained impassive, though there was a subtle shift in his posture that suggested discomfort at having his own decision-making brought into the discussion. It seems we've both made choices that prioritize survival over strategic advantage, Jin observed. Perhaps that suggests a basis for understanding beyond military conflict. Another rapid exchange of clicks between the archbishops, followed by an extended silence that stretched Jien's nerves to their limit. Finally, Archbishop Nax addressed him again. The Collective Strategic Directorate has authorized a proposal, he stated. Your status as both asset and threat has created a unique opportunity for what your species might term diplomatic engagement. Jien kept his expression neutral, though his pulse quickened. I'm listening. The conflict between our species has reached strategic stalemate, Vril explained. Xylos' biological superiority is counterbalanced by human technological adaptability. Projection models indicate multi-generational conflict with significant resource depletion on both sides. We propose an alternative, Nax continued. A negotiated territorial demarcation with mutual non-aggression protocols. Initial communication conducted through intermediaries with demonstrated capacity for cross-species comprehension. It took a moment for Jien to process the implication. Are you suggesting peace talks? With me as the intermediary? Simplified but essentially correct, Vril confirmed. Your demonstrated restraint regarding the chronospore has established sufficient trust parameters for preliminary engagement. Bishop Scar's analysis of your psychological patterns suggests 87.3% probability of good faith negotiation. Jian looked to Scar, who offered a minimal mandible gesture that Jian had come to recognize as affirmation. I'm not authorized to negotiate on behalf of Earth Defense Force or any human government, Jian pointed out. I'm a reconnaissance officer, not a diplomat. Initial phases require concept exchange, not binding agreements, Nax clarified. Your function would be translation of strategic perspectives, establishing framework for formal diplomatic channels. The proposal was unprecedented and potentially world-changing. After years of devastating conflict that had cost millions of lives on both sides, the prospect of negotiated peace seemed almost unthinkable. Yet here it was, being offered in the sterile confines of his containment chamber by the highest authorities of the enemy collective. Why now? Jian asked. What changed? The archbishops exchanged another series of clicks before Vril responded. The spore-bearer paradox has necessitated fundamental reassessment of human strategic psychology. If one human can choose preservation over destruction when holding extinction capability, strategic models must account for this possibility at species level. The spore-bearer paradox? Jian repeated, somewhat taken aback by the formalization of his situation into a named concept. Your designation in strategic literature, Scar explained. Your choice not to activate the chronospore despite tactical advantage in doing so has become a central case study in our reassessment of human behavior patterns. The realization was almost dizzying. His individual choice, a moment of restraint that had seemed little more than an adherence to his own moral code at the time, had apparently triggered a cascading reassessment of strategy at the highest levels of Xylo's leadership. If I agree to act as this intermediary, Jian said carefully, what guarantees do I have that information will be accurately transmitted to Earth authorities? I have no direct communication capability. Provision of secure, quantum-entangled communication node, Nax stated. Direct channel to Earth Defense Force Command, verification protocols to ensure message integrity. The offer seemed too good to be true, which immediately triggered Jian's trained suspicion. And the chronospore? That remains the ultimate guarantee of my continued survival, I assume. Correct, Vril confirmed without hesitation. Your biological weapon remains active deterrent against termination. However, containment conditions would be significantly improved to reflect diplomatic rather than prisoner status. This proposal has been authorized at Hive consensus level, Nax added, using a term that Jian understood to refer to the collective decision-making of the entire Xylo species. The potential benefits of negotiated resolution outweigh continued conflict costs by a factor of 37.6 in long-term resource preservation. Jian took a deep breath, weighing the proposal against all possible alternatives. His primary mission had always been intelligence gathering, and what greater intelligence coup could there be than opening the first diplomatic channel between humanity and the Xylos? Even if the overture proved false, the opportunity to establish direct communication with EDF Command was too valuable to reject. I accept the role, he finally stated, with the understanding that I speak only as an individual until formally authorized by my chain of command. Acceptable parameters, Nax concluded. Preparation will begin immediately. Diplomatic containment quarters are being prepared. Bishop Scar will continue as primary liaison due to established communication efficiency. As the archbishops departed, Scar remained behind, his posture conveying what Jian had learned to recognize as thoughtful consideration. Your acceptance was predicted with 94.7% certainty, the bishop noted. Yet the decision matrix indicated significant personal risk factors in your calculation. Clarify reasoning. Sometimes peace is worth the risk, Jian replied simply. Peace, Scar. Repeated the word as though testing its implications. A state of non-conflict that preserves resources and population. Logical and abstract, yet historically elusive between competing sentient species. It's always elusive until someone chooses it first, Jian said. Every peace in human history began with someone choosing not to kill when they could have. Scar's compound eyes studied him with that now familiar intensity. The choice that terrified me more than your weapon ever could. Is that why this is happening? Jin asked directly. Because my restraint frightened you? Yes, Scar admitted without hesitation. Fear is evolutionary directive towards survival adaptation. Your demonstration that humans can choose against seemingly optimal destruction strategy created fear of unpredictable behavioral variables. Adaptation required reevaluation of all strategic assumptions regarding your species. The honesty was startling. So peace is your adaptation to fear. Peace is adaptation to reality, Scar corrected. Reality in which enemy species can choose restraint when destruction is possible. Such enemy cannot be predicted by conventional conflict models. New approach required. As Scar departed to oversee the preparation of Jian's new diplomatic quarters, the human captain found himself contemplating the extraordinary chain of events that had led to this moment. His capture, the discovery of the chronospore, his choice not to trigger it, and now the first tentative steps toward peace between species that had considered each other existential threats. All stemming from a single moment when he had chosen not to kill, a choice that had somehow terrified the enemy more than the weapon itself ever could. Not because they feared mercy, but because they feared what it represented, a form of power they couldn't calculate, predict, or control. The power to choose against apparent self-interest, to prioritize preservation over destruction, to see beyond the immediate tactical advantage to longer-term possibilities. In that sterile chamber deep within enemy territory, Captain Jian Li allowed himself the first genuine smile since his capture. The chronospore remained dormant in his cells, a failsafe that would likely accompany him for the remainder of his life. But it had served its purpose without ever being activated, not as a weapon of mass destruction, but as the catalyst for something far more powerful. Understanding. Within days, Jian was transferred to the promised diplomatic quarters, a significant upgrade from his previous containment. The new space was larger, with distinct areas for rest, physical exercise, and work, including an interface terminal for the quantum entangled communication node that would connect him directly to EDF command. The aesthetic remained alien, with the flowing organic architecture characteristic of Xylo's design, but efforts had clearly been made to incorporate elements more comfortable for human physiology. The ambient temperature was warmer, the lighting shifted toward spectrums less harsh on human eyes, and the food synthesizers had been recalibrated to produce nutrients in forms and flavors more palatable to human taste. Bishop Scar continued as his primary liaison, though their relationship had evolved far beyond the initial interrogator-prisoner dynamic. They now functioned as something closer to diplomatic counterparts, each representing their species' interests while working toward a framework for formal negotiation. The quantum link has been established, Scar announced during his first visit to the new quarters. Authentication protocols are ready for your verification. Once activated, you will have direct, secure communication with your command structure. Jian approached the terminal with measured steps, acutely aware of the historical significance of the moment. This would be the first direct diplomatic channel between humanity and the Xylos Collective, a connection that might eventually lead to the end of a war that had claimed millions of lives. The interface was a hybrid of Xylos biotechnology and adapted human control systems, featuring both haptic feedback surfaces and neural response sensors. Jian placed his palm on the primary authentication panel and felt the subtle tingle as it sampled his DNA and neural patterns. Captain Jian Li, Earth Defense Force, ID 73829 Alpha Victor, he stated clearly. Initiating diplomatic communication protocol under Article 7 of the EDF First Contact Contingency Directives. The system pulsed once, then projected a holographic display that coalesced into the EDF insignia, a stylized Earth surrounded by 12 stars, representing the original colony worlds. Text scrolled beneath. Authentication confirmed. Secure quantum channel established. Stand by for command response. Minutes later, the display shifted to show the face of Admiral Helena Vega, commander of EDF Intelligence Division and Jian's direct superior. Her expression was a carefully controlled mask of professional neutrality, though Jian could detect the shock and relief in her eyes at seeing him alive. Captain Lee, her voice came through with perfect clarity. Confirmation code, Theta 9 Echo 3. Response code, Kappa 7 Delta 1. Jian replied, completing the authentication sequence. Admiral, I am currently in a diplomatic containment facility within Xylo's collective territory. I have been authorized to open preliminary negotiation channels between EDF Command and the Xylo Strategic Directorate. Admiral Vega's eyes narrowed slightly. Clarify status, Captain. Are you under duress? Negative, Admiral, Jian responded firmly. I am being treated in accordance with diplomatic protocols. My current status is as an intermediary, not a prisoner of war. However, he added, knowing transparency was essential. The Xylos are aware of the Chronospore contingency. It has become a central factor in the current diplomatic initiative. The Admiral's composure slipped for just a moment, her eyes widening fractionally before she regained control. Understood, Captain. We are recording this transmission at highest security clearance. Please proceed with situation report. Over the next hour, Jian provided a comprehensive account of his capture, interrogation, the discovery of the Chronospore, and the subsequent developments that had led to this unprecedented diplomatic opening. He explained the spore-bearer paradox, as the Xylos had termed it, and how his choice not to activate the weapon had triggered a fundamental reassessment of human strategic psychology within the collective's leadership. In essence, Admiral, he concluded, my restraint confused their predictive models to such an extent that they've been forced to reconsider their entire approach to the conflict. They're proposing formal peace negotiations, beginning with territorial demarcation and non-aggression protocols. Admiral Vega had listened without interruption, her expression becoming increasingly thoughtful as Jian's report proceeded. When he finished, she remained silent for several moments before responding. Captain, your actions under extreme duress have been exemplary, she finally stated. The intelligence you provided is being analyzed as we speak. Regarding the diplomatic overture, this will require consultation with the Defense Council and civilian leadership. However, she added, her tone shifting subtly, I am authorized to continue this channel of communication and to designate you as provisional diplomatic liaison, pending formal appointment. Understood, Admiral, Jian acknowledged. What are my immediate instructions? Maintain your current status and continue information gathering, she directed. Explore the parameters of their proposed territorial demarcation without making commitments. We need to understand their concept of boundaries, particularly as it relates to currently contested systems. Yes, Admiral. Captain, Admiral Vega added, her formal tone softening slightly. For what it's worth, I believe you made the right choice regarding the Chronospore. The failsafe was never intended for offensive deployment, only as a last resort deterrent. Your restraint may have opened a door that force never could. The communication ended shortly thereafter, with protocols established for regular updates and contingency plans for various scenarios. As the quantum link went into standby mode, Jian turned to find Scar waiting at a respectful distance, having observed the exchange without comment. Your command authority has confirmed your liaison status, the bishop noted. This represents significant progress. First steps, Jian agreed cautiously. There's a long path ahead before we reach any formal agreement. Yet the path exists where none did before, Scar pointed out, a direct result of the spore-bearer paradox. That term again, the formalization of his choice into a named concept that had apparently reshaped Xylo's strategic thinking. I'm curious about how this paradox is understood among your leadership, Jian said. What exactly does it signify in your strategic models? Scar's compound eyes seemed to focus inward for a moment, as though accessing collective memory. The paradox contains multiple layers of significance, he explained. At basic level, it demonstrates that possession of decisive strategic advantage does not guarantee its application. This contradicts fundamental Xylo's evolutionary imperatives regarding resource competition and species survival. But there's more to it than that, Jin suggested, detecting nuances in Scar's harmonic patterns. Indeed, the bishop confirmed. Deeper analysis revealed more profound implications. Your restraints suggested capacity for strategic calculation beyond immediate victory conditions, consideration of multiple futures rather than single optimal outcome. This introduces uncertainty levels that cannot be accounted for in conventional strategic modeling. Because you can't predict which future we might choose to prioritize, Jian translated. Precisely, Scar's mandibles clicked in affirmation. If humans can choose against apparent self-interest for reasons not immediately quantifiable, all interaction models require fundamental revision. The capacity to choose preservation when destruction is possible implies capacity for cooperation, even in scenarios where competition appears objectively optimal. And that terrified your leadership, Jian concluded, recalling Scar's earlier admission. It necessitated adaptation, Scar corrected, though his harmonic patterns confirmed the assessment. Fear is appropriate response to strategic variable that cannot be predicted or controlled. The most logical adaptation was to explore parameters of potential cooperation rather than continue conflict with unpredictable adversary. The conversation was interrupted by a notification from the communication terminal, another incoming transmission from EDF Command. Jin excused himself to receive it, finding not Admiral Vega this time, but General Maxwell Okonkwo, chair of the Joint Defense Council and the highest-ranking military officer in the Earth Alliance. Captain Lee, the general's deep voice resonated with authority. Your report has been reviewed at highest levels. I am authorized to inform you that the Diplomatic Corps is preparing a formal delegation to continue the negotiations you have initiated. In the interim, you are hereby promoted to the rank of Major and formally appointed as Special Diplomatic Liaison to the Xylos Collective. The promotion caught Jian entirely off guard. Thank you, General. I'm honored, but you were just doing your duty. General Okonkwo completed the thought with a knowing smile. Nevertheless, your actions have created an opportunity that many considered impossible. The President will be addressing the Alliance Assembly within the hour to announce the opening of diplomatic channels with the Xylos. Your name will feature prominently in that address, Major Lee. The implications were overwhelming. What had begun as a desperate choice in captivity had somehow catalyzed a fundamental shift in interspecies relations. General, what about the chronospore? My continued status as carrier creates obvious complications for any diplomatic process. The general's expression grew more serious. That matter is being addressed through secure channels. For now, its existence serves as both guarantee of your safety and demonstration of our technological capabilities. In time, we hope to establish sufficient trust to render such measures unnecessary. After further briefing on diplomatic protocols and intelligence matters, the communication ended with arrangements for daily updates through the quantum link. Jin turned back to find Scar still present, having waited patiently throughout the exchange. Your status has been elevated, the bishop observed. This suggests your initiative has received official sanction. It has, Jin confirmed. A formal diplomatic delegation is being prepared. In the meantime, I've been appointed as the official liaison. Appropriate reciprocity, Scar noted with approval. The collective has similarly elevated the status of this initiative. The archbishops have formed a dedicated diplomatic enclave with extraordinary authority to negotiate territorial parameters. For the first time since his capture, Jin allowed himself to fully contemplate the possibility that his ordeal might lead to something truly historic. Not just his own survival, or even the exchange of valuable intelligence, but the end of a devastating interspecies war and the beginning of a new relationship between humanity and the Xylos. It seems your analysis was correct, Bishop Scar, he observed. Sometimes choosing not to destroy creates possibilities that destruction would have eliminated forever. Scar's compound eyes seemed to study him with that now familiar mixture of scientific curiosity and something that, in a human, might have been called respect. The spore-bearer paradox continues to yield unexpected insights, he acknowledged. Your restraint created terror, but from terror came adaptation, and from adaptation, opportunity. Not exactly the way we describe the peace process on Earth, Jin said with a slight smile, but I suppose the outcome matters more than the terminology. Terminology shapes conceptual frameworks, Scar countered, his mandibles clicking in what Jin had come to recognize as the Xylo's equivalent of thoughtful consideration. Perhaps the most significant aspect of this process will be the development of shared language for concepts that neither species fully understood about the other. As Bishop Scar departed to report to the archbishops, leaving Jin to prepare for the next communication with EDF Command, the newly promoted Major reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought him to this point. From reconnaissance pilot to captive, from carrier of extinction to ambassador of peace, all pivoting on that single moment when he had chosen not to kill, even when killing might have seemed the logical choice. The chronospore remained dormant in his cells, an apocalypse held in check by conscious choice. Its power had never been in its capacity to destroy, but in the revelation that came from choosing not to use that capacity. The revelation that had terrified an enemy more profoundly than death itself ever could. The revelation that true power lies not in the ability to end life, but in the choice to preserve it, even when no one would blame you for choosing otherwise.